The boy screamed in terror that a monster was chasing him. Upon seeing the girl ahead, Noct anxiously asked if Mare had really been there all this time. The girl immediately replied and hurried forward. Noct orders him to protect himself from the monster immediately. The girl promises to do everything she can. Young Mare bravely charged forward, surprising Noct. The blade sliced through the giant's body and the monster let out one last unbearable roar. The father of the owner of the Rutherford estate, big and small, and his eldest son, Vishart, arrived at the scene. Vishart was furious when he saw Noct. He sent the girl to fight in his place because it would be a disgrace to her father's reputation. Wishart reminded him that such behavior was unworthy of a nobleman. Noct explained that he simply wasn't strong enough to fight, despite having asked for help. Wishart says that Noct still has to fight and will gain the skill tomorrow. Big Small's father asks him not to swear and explains that everyone has their own path in life, and Noct doesn't need to imitate his older brother. Noct's father advised her to find a purpose in life and never give up on it, and to ignore what other people say. Weishart was angry and asked why his father always indulged his younger brother. My father said that he was more concerned with how the ORCs managed to infiltrate the estate, and that he needed to inspect all the properties immediately. Noct wondered if everyone has their own unique talents and that there are always people who choose work they love and ultimately achieve success. He could even manage an entire nation. Noct's father, Wishart, was intelligent and kind-hearted. He was a true nobleman. Brave, on the other hand, was completely different from older. He was strict with himself and wanted to follow in his father's footsteps. All Noct realizes about himself is that he has an extraordinary talent for sleeping under any circumstances, and clearly that was his true path in life. Noct was determined that he never wanted to work again. After all, he had been burned out at work. Once upon a time, he was an ordinary office worker in Japan, and then one day he felt a sharp pain in his chest. When he woke up, he realized he was in the body of a child, in an aristocratic family. In this new world, all those who reach the age of 15 will receive a gift from the gods, and when the time comes for him to receive the gift, he will immediately have to fight. All his relatives congratulate him on turning 15, a significant milestone. Noct just thought this was the worst birthday of his life. Noct asked his older brother. Noct asked if he could have some of the birthday cake, but Wishart reminded him that Noct would fall asleep immediately. Noct really didn't want to go anywhere, but of course, Mare had asked him to come home as soon as possible because she had made him a raisin pie. Noct decided to cheat and complain that he had suddenly fallen ill and that it would be fine to rest a little. Mare immediately and kindly offered him some medicine. Noct asked if he might get seasick on the way, but Mare said there was a great seasickness medicine in her right jacket pocket. Wishart said he shouldn't delay any longer and was now finally ready. It was time to go. My brother explained that this was a great opportunity for Noct, not only to receive a new gift, but also to see the world around him. My father wished his youngest son could enjoy new experiences, but Noct wasn't as interested as the others. Upon arriving in the capital, Noct decided that everything was just as he had imagined, with plenty of activities around. Noticing a local inn, Noct wanted to find out if they had hammock beds. Noct realized that the hotel building had clearly not been renovated in a long time, because it looked very dilapidated. He even doubted whether it was safe to stay inside. Even though this was the capital city, things should have been perfect, but instead his father's estate was constantly under attack by orcs from the Great Forest. Therefore, everyone hoped that Noct would receive a useful combat skill from the gods. However, Noct didn't want any worries or skills. He only wanted to enjoy a free, carefree life. Noct arrived at the designated location and introduced himself. Noct noticed that this strange man looked very much like his brother, which made him feel a little scared. Noct was immediately instructed to stand in the center of the magic circle and get ready. Noct felt like he was standing in some kind of water and didn't know what was happening. Noct noticed a feminine figure ahead and decided it must be a goddess. He immediately thanked the goddess for giving him life in this world. Noct admitted that his life wasn't easy, but his older brother was stronger than any monster. His father was kind, and everyone loved him. So Noct was quite content with where he was. Noct started asking for everything except combat skills. He didn't want to become a warrior. Noct explained that his older brother would inherit the estate, so he'd better acquire an auxiliary skill. The goddess did not reply, and Noct asked if she could hear him. Noct realized he was back in the room he'd been in earlier. The guy said that was it, and Noct had received his skill. Noct was surprised that everything happened so quickly as he didn't understand anything that was going on. He was instructed to step forward and touch the magic orb, but not to touch it. The man asked if Noct was the son of a nobleman, and if so, he would certainly feel burdened by the expectations of others. Noct asked him what skills he had acquired here. The god's servant pointed out the title, which clearly stated that this skill was called Increase and Decrease. Noct wasn't sure what it meant, so he asked if the skill could be used in combat. The servant replied that the skill's name was self-explanatory and that it wasn't a combat skill. Noct understood everything and promised that he would still try to do something useful. The young man apologized for the inconvenience and said he had to leave. The servant advised him not to be upset, as these two skills rarely appear at the same time, and that everything would surely find a way to be used. Noct replied that he wasn't upset at all and felt fine, so he was ready to go his own way. Actually, Noct thought he had gotten what he wanted. The girl asked what good things had happened to Noct that made him look so happy. Noct explained that he could now rest for the rest of his life without worrying about anything. It was all thanks to the goddess who granted him his wish. Noct now possessed useless skills, although his brother would surely be angry about this. Noct said he even bought some souvenirs to appease his brother and father. Noct explained that he had bought jewelry for the maids, a statue of the Capitol Tower for his father, and a special blindfold for his brother, which would make him look irresistible if he could convince him to wear it. Noct bid farewell to the girls and explained that he would return to his estate to continue doing nothing. When the girls heard the name Noctomanor, they said they were sorry something had happened, but Noct didn't understand and continued on his way. When Noct arrived home, he initially thought he was hallucinating, but the entire estate had been completely destroyed. There was no mistaking it, and he finally realized it was true. Noct understood that he could no longer rest peacefully, for all his plans had been ruined by someone. The servants saw from afar and shouted that their master, Noct, had finally returned. Now asked Joseph what has happened to the estate, and who could have done such a terrible thing. The steward apologizes for his condition, as it has truly been a nightmare. Joseph said that the estate had suddenly been attacked by orcs, a massive army that had poured out from the great forest, and it had all happened very quickly. Noct wondered how an army of orcs could have appeared in such a short time. He asked about his father and older brother and where they had gone. The housekeeper sadly replied that no one had found them yet, but the search was still ongoing, and everyone was not giving up. Joseph said that Noct's father and brother had bravely rushed out to defend the estate, but 4 days had passed and no one had any news of them. Noct was angry and said that his brother and father couldn't possibly lose the battle so easily. Joseph replied that he didn't want to think of anything bad, but the attack was truly terrible. Noct wondered what would happen there, as the estate had always been well defended. Joseph apologized again for the lack of news regarding the fate of his brother and father. The steward promised that if they could, they would certainly find it. Joseph explained that Noct now had to take over the management of the estate. The butler asked Noct what new skill he had acquired, as the fate of his entire family could now depend on it. Noct decided not to explain too much and simply demonstrated how he could manipulate a small stone. Noct explained that his new skill was being able to transform a small stone into the size of a horse with a single easy movement. He said that this skill was very convenient and easy to use. However, no one seemed impressed by that ability, and Joseph asked how it could help in the current situation. Joseph and the other servants began to wonder what to do now, as the estate had been completely destroyed and there was nowhere left to live. Noct realized they were absolutely right, and his skills were utterly useless at this point. He immediately regretted his choice and told himself that he should have asked for a combat skill. Noct thought for a moment and suggested everyone go to the nearby estate temporarily, as this was feasible given the number of people remaining. Joseph reminded him that fleeing from his master's estate was an unforgivable act and could result in the death penalty. If Noct decided to do so, Joseph would be powerless to intervene. Noct turned back to his servants and explained that he would not blame anyone for their decision. Whether they decided to stay or go to the neighboring estate, he would not accuse anyone. Finally, Joseph sadly remarked that now only the 3 of them remained. Noct guessed that his father and brother's pursuit of the monsters wouldn't last long, and they would soon return. However, he didn't believe they could possibly lose to the evil orcs. Noct felt terrible about all of this, of course, because he just wanted to start a new, worry-free life. And without his father and brother, that was almost impossible. He recalled his father's words, that there would come a time when Noct would realize this was his land, and then he would have to stand up and defend it, using every means necessary. Noct knew that now was that time. Joseph once again asked them what they would do next, much to the surprise of his former servant. Noct said he wanted to go to sleep first. Joseph asked how Noct could possibly sleep in such difficult circumstances. Joseph felt that Noct was only pretending to sleep, trying to look real, but after a few minutes he realized that the young master was actually fast asleep. Noct even started snoring and became unresponsive to everything. At that point, Noct began muttering in his sleep that he would never be able to cope with such problems without his father and brother. Joseph sadly remarked that it truly seemed like the end of the family's fortune. The servants continued to wait, and Joseph angrily remarked that the young master had slept for 12 hours, clearly demonstrating Noct's complete lack of understanding of their situation. Joseph suggested that Mare shouldn't waste any more time and should go to a nearby property. Joseph explained that there was nothing left of these properties, only the mansion remained, with no human resources or food supplies. All the walls were destroyed and monsters could attack at any moment. Therefore, no one can blame Mare if she leaves to save her own life. Mare knew Joseph was right, but she didn't want to leave. Finally, Noct woke up and greeted everyone good morning. The young master said that a good night's sleep had helped relieve his fatigue, and he felt much better now. Noct admitted that he felt like he had been reborn. Joseph asked the young master what he was talking about, since everything was completely ruined anyway. Mare couldn't help but chuckle softly, and Joseph reminded her that this wasn't the time for laughter. Noct said he was very grateful they had stayed with him and not left their ancestral estate. However, he wanted to restore the land to its former glory and needed their help, at least until his father and brother returned. Noct asked if the two of them were willing to be a strong support for him in his work. Mare cheerfully replied that she was willing to help restore the land, and Joseph admitted he was very impressed with how Noct spoke of his plan. Mare told Joseph that she believed in Noct's abilities and would stand by him. They should be by the master's side in this difficult time, for there was no one else. And luckily the villa was still intact. So they wouldn't have any trouble finding safe shelter and cooking. Noct thanked her for the delicious cup of tea, then reminded her that Mare had said the well water was also good, so they could bathe and wash clothes safely. At least some of the more pressing issues wouldn't bother them. Noct asked if they had run out of food. Joseph and Mary confirmed his concerns and explained that they hadn't eaten anything since yesterday either. The girl explained that she had gathered everything edible, but there was very little. Noct was disappointed that there wasn't enough food for even one person. It turned out that most of the food supply had been taken by the surviving inhabitants of the estate. Mare says she's on a diet, so Joseph and Noct can eat all the food and she'll be patient. Joseph says he's just a butler. He can't touch his master's food. Noct replies that he doesn't want to look selfish and eat everything alone, so they should divide the food into 3 portions. Even though it won't be enough, it would be fairer. Noct remembered that he could try increasing his food intake using his new skill, and it would surely help him. Mare was delighted and suggested trying out this new ability to increase or decrease items. Noct employs the technique of exaggeration, and indeed the amount of food increased slightly. Joseph and Mare were thrilled with the result and praised it as amazing. Noct was surprised by his success, but he decided it wasn't enough. He wanted to provide enough food for those who had believed in him and stayed to help. He wondered why this position should have belonged to his father and older brother, who were wise and courageous, but things had turned out completely differently. Noct thought the world was truly wrong. He wondered how he could possibly be a good leader. Mare cried out and begged Noct to stop feeding him because it was already too much. She was worried about her young master and urged him to come to his senses. Mare explained that Noct had gone overboard by increasing the size of the food. She thanked Noct for his amazing abilities, and now they would have enough food to eat. Noct realized that all 3 of them now had to face and solve their own problems. The girl pointed into the distance, gesturing towards the nearby fields, and noticed how small they looked from this height. Noct wondered if he could create a piece of land of his own on his own territory. He thought about creating beautiful properties just like that, where people would be happy to live, even though he might die from overwork and repeat the fate of his previous life. After the terrible events, only 3 people remained on the large plot of land. The land was damaged, and Noct could only rely on his 2 servants. They faced a difficult task, surviving in harsh conditions. There was still much work to be done, and for the first time in his new life, Noct felt happy working hard. Noct admitted that after such a hard day's work, he slept like a baby. Joseph joked that if Noct understood the spirit of working people, he would know exactly what it felt like to be the new owner of this land. Joseph was angry that Noct didn't actually do much work, and even he, the old butler, worked more. Meanwhile, Mare was preparing dinner and suggested that Joseph and Noct should pause their work and rest for a while they ate. Noct complimented the girl on the meal and noticed that the dishes were beautifully decorated with herbs. Mare explained that she prepared the dishes using different recipes to create variety and enrich the flavors. Mare suggested trying the enamel mordicca first. Noct responded that sesame oil accentuated the bitterness of the dish, and Joseph reminded him that mordicca helps lower blood glucose levels. Mare suggested trying the crispy fried mordicca without the batter coating. Noct appreciated this method of preparation and said he liked how the bones were so crunchy. Joseph explained that dishes like this aid in recovery after strenuous work. Mare suggested trying pickled mamordica to soothe the diphtheria after eating too much sesame oil. Noct replied that the dish still had a slightly bitter taste. Joseph muttered that spicy food was good for the liver. Noct, of course, realized that Joseph didn't really like the food either, and advised him not to eat too much. Mare apologized for her limited cooking skills and the possibility that the taste might not be to his liking. Noct replied that there was no need to be upset, as she didn't have many food options to cook with. Noct asked how long the vegetables would last in the field. The girl explained that arugula takes about a month to ripen, but the leaves are edible after only a few weeks. Noct realized he would have to do something about the food problem for the next 2 weeks. For now, their only option was mamordica. Noct admitted that even though it had only been 2 days, he couldn't bear to look at it anymore. He explained that it tasted bland, lacked nutrients, and after everything that had happened, he felt hungry and didn't want to do anything. He realized they urgently needed iron-rich food. He also said he wouldn't refuse anything else if it were available. Mare promised to try to solve the iron problem in the food. Mare pulled out a knife, but Joseph and Noct quickly stopped her and asked what she intended to do. Mare replied that she only wanted to be helpful to her young master. But Joseph said that there was already enough iron in the mamordica to supplement it. Joseph asked Noct if he thought Mare's recent behavior was strange. Noct explained that he hadn't noticed anything unusual and that Mare was just trying her best to help. Noct said that once they finished their work and got their food, they would rest. Joseph reminded his young master that they still had a lot of work to do. But that didn't matter as Noct was almost fast asleep. While Noct slept, Joseph and Mare simply sat waiting for him to wake up. When Noct woke up, Joseph said they were dealing with important matters on their estate, so Noct could help. Noct asks what stands in the way of a person's success. Joseph explained that, first and foremost, food is essential for achieving the most effective results, as food is the foundation of everything. Without proper eating habits, even sleep quality will be affected. Noct read out the list of key issues he had outlined. Joseph pointed out that the fence needed to be restored first. Then, Noct suggested restoring the food industry, re-establishing trade, and improving the fields. Noct requested a pen and added that he needed to find food beyond the mamordica. Joseph was surprised to see such an item added, and Noct explained that he considered this a top priority. Finally, Noct suggested that everyone split up to search for food. Noct asked Joseph to inspect Lawrence's fields, while Mare would inspect Sammy's plantation. Joseph recalled that Sammy's fields were well maintained and something might be found there. Mare agreed, suggesting this could be an opportunity to diversify their food supply. Noct advised everyone not to waste time. Noct decided to take a closer look at his abilities and skills. In the meantime, he spotted an omnivorous jelly slime that appeared calm and weak. Noct noticed that the slime had eaten a lot of healthy food in the field. Then, he decided to use slime as a pillow because it was soft and elastic, feeling like a water pillow. Noct smells strawberries and thinks the slime has eaten strawberries somewhere. It was originally designed to be a pillow, but suddenly Noct falls into the slime and starts coughing up slime. Noct got angry and used his shrinking ability on the slime. He felt a little disgusted but decided that this ability wouldn't work on strong monsters. However, things went smoothly and Noct was able to shrink an entire living creature. Noct continued to apply his shrinking ability to himself and was surprised by the results as he felt like he was in a jungle, while this was just ordinary meadow grass. At that moment, Noct saw something rapidly hurtling towards him. He realized it was just an ordinary bird, intending to eat him. Noct tricked the bird and discovered it was a long-tailed kiwi. This bird is facing extinction. It can fly, but with great difficulty. Noct felt the softness of the bird's feathers, a sensation beyond compare. However, the bird escaped his grasp and he flew down. The only thing Noct managed to notice was the breathtaking view from above. But then he realized that this wasn't the time to think about the beautiful scenery, because if he fell, he would get hurt. Instead of a hard crash, Noct felt a gentle rocking sensation. Finally, he was able to land on a soft bud. Noct was delighted with this new feeling and decided that this was a good bed. And the world, seen through the lens of a tiny person, became truly beautiful, even though it was too hot near the ground. However, it turns out that becoming small is not easy. Mare saw the young master and said he looked very cute. Then she asked him what he was doing here like this. Noct explained that he was just testing his new skill. Noct asked Mare what she was doing at the moment. The girl explained that because the fence was broken, all the fields were filled with monsters, so she decided it would be best to cooperate, so Noct could help a little. She also didn't want Joseph to find him, because he would just grumble and get angry again, and Noct wanted to rest and relax. Mare smiled and promised to do as the young master requested. Noct asked Mare to shield him from the sun for a while and create some shade, because with his small stature, he couldn't tolerate the heat. Mare immediately figured out how to create shade and asked Noct how he felt. He replied that he felt much better, no longer being bothered by the sun. At the same time, he thought that Mare was indeed a very strange girl. Suddenly, Joseph appeared and asked Mare what she was doing and who she was talking to. Noct realized that his plan for a peaceful sleep had completely failed. Joseph was outraged by what was happening and asked why the young master was making the girl show him her underwear. Noct explained that he hadn't asked Mare to do this. But Joseph said that Noct's father wouldn't be happy to hear about it. Mare explained to Joseph that there was no need to blame the young master. She only wanted to shield him from the harsh sun. However, Joseph didn't believe her and demanded that Mare cover him up again immediately. At the same time, Noct cried out that he couldn't stand the thunderous footsteps, as he felt like he was experiencing a real earthquake. Mare was startled and rushed over to him, trying to support him. Noct replied that he was fine, just a few scratches. Joseph began to apologize and explained that it was unacceptable behavior because the young master was injured. Despite his mistake, Noct said there was no need to worry, he was perfectly fine. Mare asked him to show her the wound so she could treat it. The girl used her ability to activate cells and instantly healed the wound. Noct was surprised by the quick treatment and thanked her, as he was now completely healthy with no trace of his wounds. At the same time, Noct noticed that Joseph was still angry with him. Noct asks Mare about her abilities, and she explains that she can activate cells, which helps regenerate the human body and quickly heal wounds. Noct pondered the potential uses of this ability. He then asked her if her cell regeneration skills could be applied to fruits and vegetables, as this could solve the food problem. Mare tested her cell growth skills and happily announced that the plant had sprouted a little. Noct realized things weren't as simple as he thought, but still praised her for her efforts. Young master told Mare she didn't need to sleep right now because they still had a lot of work to do. But Noct didn't listen, deciding he needed a nap. After dozing off, he heard a strange noise that prevented him from resting. It turned out that Mare was trying to concentrate and shouting loudly. She is trying her best to improve cell activation and make the plant grow faster. Seeing her efforts, Noct once again believed that she was a very strange girl. Noct then decided that she might have eaten something unusual and that was affecting her behavior. However, Mare didn't give up and continued to try, rejoicing as she saw each leaf sprout. She said, "I'm trying to convince the plants to grow strong so that my young owner won't starve." Mare said she should repay Noct for what happened 10 years ago. Noct immediately recalled an event that happened long ago. One of the farmers was furious that someone dared to steal his land. Dami demanded that the culprit be arrested and imprisoned. Otherwise, he would take matters into his own hands. Noct's father demanded that the culprit be caught and punished. But Noct intervened and tried to explain to Sammy that perhaps the girl didn't go into the field just for fun. She did it only to survive, so she should be forgiven. But Sammy was angry and asked how he would live after what had happened. At the young master's suggestion, Noct promised to compensate the angry farmer for the damage, and to do so, he would sell one of the souvenirs his mother had given him. Noct asked the farmer if he would accept this offer. Sammy calmed down and said that Noct didn't need to make such a sacrifice. Sammy promised to handle the matter himself. Noct thanked the farmer for his understanding. His father asked why Noct had done this and defended a strange thief. Noct reminded them that the small family had to protect those they considered their subjects, so this girl was under his protection. The father asked what he would do if the girl misbehaved again. Noct explained that he believed that wouldn't happen, and that from now on she would be his personal maid. His father was surprised by his son's decision but did not object. Noct asked the girl her name, and when she realized she was not in danger, she gave it to him. Noct immediately explained to Mare that he had an important task for her, and that she would have to prepare his bed. Then he asked her if she was capable of doing so. At that moment, everyone was surprised by the young master's actions because he had finally saved a little girl. Mare said that now was the time for her to take care of her owner. She tried to plant an edible tree as soon as possible, but was angry that she couldn't do it sooner. Mare felt saddened by her inability to do anything, especially when her mistress needed help. She decided that her existence was pointless if she couldn't assist in this difficult situation. Noct looked at her and realized she was trying her best to help him. He remembered his father's words, who had always reminded him to protect his family at all costs. Noct immediately began thinking about how he could become a worthy successor to his father and a good ruler for his people. Mare recognized her master and asked why he was awake. Noct asked her to try his skills on the tree again without further explanation. The girl tried to activate the plant's cells once more, but the result remained unchanged. Noct decided to help her and quietly applied his magnification skill. The tree immediately grew rapidly. At this point, Noct realized that God had truly given him a perfect ability to address vital needs. He began to understand how to use his ability correctly. His ability to increase and decrease size can demonstrate the full potential of the desired object. And when combined with other skills, his potential is limitless. In other words, his skill demonstrates the true potential of other skills. The servant was delighted with this result. Noct explained that he had combined his enhancement skill with her cell activation skill, although he wasn't initially sure if all of this would work. Noct then asked her not to worry too much and explained that his suffering wasn't as great as she thought. Of course, it's obvious he's missing his family and they currently have neither money nor food, but he's still happy thinking about the wonderful people like Mare and Joseph around him. Noct stated that he had complete trust in them and wanted to entrust everything to them. Mare recalled the first time she met her master and promised to be loyal to him forever. Joseph asked why the young master was awake and acting so strangely. Noct explained that he had been busy and had now dealt with the food issue. The next day, everything returned to normal and they continued their sightseeing. At lunchtime, Mare called everyone to dinner. This time, the table featured fried avocado and arugula, no breadcrumbs or flour. There was also grilled asparagus, beans, and peppers, along with a wonderful vegetable soup, promising maximum nutrition. Joseph explained that this meal would offer excellent balance. Noct, however, wasn't thinking about the nutritional benefits, only about how delicious it was. Mare was pleased with the result and invited more people over. Noct, already full, thought that perhaps this was too much for one time. Joseph explained to the girl that she was behaving inappropriately at the dinner table by reading while eating. But Mare said it was all right, since they had plenty of ingredients anyway, so she couldn't make excuses, or rather, she would learn. Joseph asked her if the young master had forced her to do it. Noct replied that he had absolutely nothing to do with it, and instead advised Mare not to overreact. Mare said that she would try harder and do better, thereby achieving better results for the common good. Noct thought the girl's attitude would be helpful. Then Noct said that vegetables were fine, but he wanted to eat meat. Mare immediately exclaimed that she would do it very quickly, but Joseph, terrified of the knife, asked Mare to stop joking like that. Noct decided to begin restoring the estate and use the Earth Shield in addition to his skills. This world has magic, with a total of 6 elements: fire, water, wind, earth, light, and darkness. Noct was gifted with earth and fire magic. Noct created a fireball and was delighted with the result. Mare praised the young master for successfully starting the fire and called him a talented disciple of the fire god. Noct replied that lighting the fire in the hearth was the easiest task for him, and the water quickly heated up. Noct thought about a month and a half had passed, and finally he could enjoy a hot bath. The young master thought it was truly a mental pleasure to be in warm water. Joseph, on the other hand, continued to grumble as usual. Noct paid no attention and was free to enjoy the sight of the sparkling water and the endless blue sky. He asked if there was anything else needed to achieve complete happiness. Joseph, surprised, asked if the young master needed nothing more. Mare admitted that she personally wouldn't reject the scent of daisies or apples, and that she really wanted a sweet, fruity fragrance. Joseph said that he really wanted to see it perfectly. Joseph didn't need his glasses anymore because now his lenses were foggy and he always had to find something to wipe them with. He asked Mare not to bother him and to stop daydreaming about impossible things because it only made things worse. However, Mare explained that there would be a sale tomorrow. Noct replied that he didn't understand what was being said. Joseph further explained that the merchant Raphael would be arriving tomorrow, and that he had a good relationship with the young master's father. Mare exclaimed that this was a wonderful person, someone who could order anything. But in the past, Noct had always missed this meeting because he usually slept in the afternoons. Noct became interested when the merchant Raphael arrived and said he wanted to buy a memory pillow from him. Mare wanted to buy some chamomile incense, while Joseph reminded her to clean her glasses. Everyone agreed that these items would make their lives more pleasant. When Noct met Raphael, he asked if he was tired after his long journey and suggested they start with lunch and that he could take a bath afterward if he wished. Raphael asked Noct if he was the new owner of the land, and Noct introduced himself, explaining that while his father and brother were away, he was in charge of all the estate's affairs. Raphael welcomed the young master as the new owner and rightful heir to the land. Noct was surprised by such a welcome, as he had never encountered anything like it before. Raphael explained that he had been doing business with Father Noct for a long time, and that the two had a long-standing partnership, even after many years had passed. Noct always followed his father's advice when trading. He sensed a pleasant minty scent from Raphael, and the merchant apologized for talking too much about himself. Then Raphael suggested they get down to business and asked if they wanted to buy anything from his collection. Noct thought the man was elegant and pleasant to do business with. Raphael explained that they could ask for anything. He had everything each person needed. Noct asked if everything the merchant needed fit in one suitcase, and then he thought that perhaps the merchant didn't have the pillow he was looking for. Joseph wasted no time, immediately asking about the cleaning cloths. Raphael signaled to his assistant to make a drum signal. Then he solemnly took out a beautiful lens cleaning cloth from his suitcase for Joseph. Mare said she wanted to buy chamomile incense, and Raphael immediately complied, taking a bottle of chamomile incense from his suitcase. Noct requested a memory foam pillow, explaining that the slime pillow was not comfortable at all. Merchant Raphael considered the young master's request. Noct thought they certainly didn't have that kind of pillow. But suddenly, Raphael asked his assistant to perform a drum signal. Then he solemnly declared that he has a pillow that's perfect for the young master. Noct could not believe his eyes and was amazed by the merchant's skill. Raphael quickly calculated the value of the goods and said he wanted 5,200 rubles for everything. Noct hastily counted his coins, then, with a disappointed expression, replied that he didn't have enough money. The merchant Raphael responded that in this case, the young master had to make a choice, either the pillow or the scent of chamomile in a cleaning cloth. Noct overcame his desires and made a difficult decision. Choose to buy the necessary items for your subordinates. That night, the young master couldn't sleep at all, because all he could think about was that beautiful pillow. Later, Noct decided to visit the merchant at his tent. Raphael said that wasn't necessary, that simply calling him would suffice. Noct explained that it was just a coincidence and that he happened to be passing by. The young master offered to sell Raphael fresh vegetables from the estate, as well as let him use the beds in the castle. Noct thought for a moment and added that the service would only cost 3,000 rubles. Raphael refused the offer, explaining that they were used to spending the night like that. Noct felt disappointed that his trick had failed. Then he offered Raphael the use of the bathroom, saying that the young master had only recently created it and therefore there would be a special treat for him. He could use the bathing service for only 3,000 rubles or exchange it for a pillow. Raphael looked sad and asked if Noct really thought his destiny was to build bathrooms in the future. The young master pondered the merchant's words and replied that the construction of the bathroom was actually the will of heaven. Raphael replied that if that were the case, he would have no intention of returning to the estate. Raphael's assistant asked for the lights to be turned off and a cigarette, as it was very late. At parting, the merchant declined the opportunity to take a bath, citing extreme fatigue. Noct was saddened by his failure and could not understand why Raphael had decided not to visit the estate again. At the same time, Noct could still sense the pleasant, minty scent emanating from the merchant, but then he suddenly thought that the smell might be coming from some kind of monster. And now he understood why Raphael was always so vigilant. If he went into the bathroom, he would be defenseless against a potential threat. Noct looked around and found only a small slime. When Mare and Joseph heard this news, they were saddened by Raphael's decision not to visit them again. Noct explained that perhaps Raphael had decided not to return after seeing the monsters in their fields. Moreover, there were no inhabitants here for trade. The young master said that their land was extremely dangerous. They didn't even have a fence, so no one would come here to trade. Noct apologized to Joseph and Mare for prioritizing the wrong thing, saying that when he built the bathroom first, he should have done something more useful. Joseph agreed that it would be terrible if Raphael stopped visiting them, as the merchant was a crucial link in their trade. If their dealings with him ceased, their land would completely stop developing. Nock realized that if he continued, he would never be able to buy the pillow he wanted. The young master said they would definitely build a good fence so that Raphael could visit them again. Mare asked if the three of them could do it. Nock asked her to trust him and explained that he had a good plan. Joseph utilized his enhanced muscle strength and easily began lifting heavy weights. Nock admired his butler. Joseph, who was truly a titan, was incredibly helpful. Thanks to him, they were able to build 10 meters of fence in an hour. However, Noct realized that, unfortunately, they wouldn't have enough time and resources to finish the fence before dawn. Although the initial plan seemed perfect, the reality was quite different. Mare asked if she should help Joseph. Joseph admitted that after carrying heavy loads and sweating, a shower would be especially comforting for him. Noct pondered the butler's words while Mare couldn't understand why the young master cared so much about this. Noct then told Joseph that he had a perfect idea. Meanwhile, the merchant Raphael asked his assistant Pico to wake him up, as it was time to prepare for the trip. Pico said good morning, and Raphael told him to prepare his chopsticks. The boy quickly gathered them up and promised to prepare them soon. Raphael recalled that Mr. Brotherford had done him many things in the past, and he would be happy to help him in any way. However, it was difficult to look at his devastated estate, and it was worse than he had imagined. Raphael could not understand why his youngest son, Noct, would build a bathhouse in such dire circumstances. Perhaps the burden of leadership is too great for this young master. Even without the fence, this place could hardly be called privately owned land. Raphael apologized to Pico for taking him to such a dangerous place, and promised not to do it again. As the merchant stepped out of the tent, he thought he was still dreaming because it was hard to believe what he had just seen. Raphael said that this was unbelievable. No one could have built such massive walls in a single night. The merchant tapped lightly on the wall and realized it was incredibly sturdy, offering excellent protection. Mari informs Noct that Raphael has arrived. The merchant was surprised and asked how this happened, and where this strong wall came from. Noct explained that he had simply combined his skills with earth magic, and they were fortunate enough to complete it before dawn. Noct praised it as a truly invaluable skill. However, Raphael thought things weren't as simple as they seemed. He believed the cost of undertaking such a large-scale task must be enormous, because it's not easy to complete this task in such a short time. Raphael asked why Noct didn't want to postpone such a difficult task until tomorrow. It would be more sensible to rest at night. Noct replied that tomorrow might be too late. He thanked Raphael for it was thanks to him that he had realized the right priorities. And he realized that their settlement was indeed too dangerous. So Noct didn't want to think that this was indefensible. The merchant Raphael said that Noct truly understood his purpose. Then the young master invited the merchant to see something else. Noct asked Raphael to stand with everyone and hold hands. Noct then demonstrated his enhanced abilities, saying that Mordecai had acted as an elevator for the merchant. Raphael admitted that he hadn't expected the boy to surprise him so much. Noct explained to the merchant. Noct explained that he was about to see a large outdoor bath situated right next to the wall. Raphael was utterly surprised to see such a beautiful bathtub. The young master reminded him that Raphael hadn't had time to bathe yet, but now, in this place, he could feel completely safe and had no need to deny himself pleasure. Noct admitted that he really wanted that beautiful pillow, and on behalf of everyone else, he hoped that Raphael would return to the estate. Raphael replied that every merchant must possess an important quality, and that quality is the ability to determine the value of things. Noct asks if Raphael was referring to the value of an object. Raphael explains that anyone can determine the monetary value. But in this case, a much more important value needs to be determined. Raphael admitted that he was only thinking about the safety of the property, but he was surprised that the young master thought of more than that, and even cared about bringing joy to others, even in such difficult circumstances. Raphael said that when he looked at the faces of Noct's servants, he immediately understood the boy's true value. The businessman explained that he no longer wanted to cut ties with such a good person. Raphael promised that he would definitely visit again next time, bringing with him many different goods. Noct said that when the merchant returned, he would have built the safest sleeping area where everyone could rest comfortably without worry. Raphael replied that it was wonderful, but he wanted to take a bath first. Noct was pleased to have satisfied the merchant and hoped that business would continue to improve. Raphael enjoyed the warm water, feeling comfortable and thanking the young master for the opportunity to relax. Noct then suggested that everyone shouldn't be shy, as this wasn't a swimming pool but their home. However, Joseph reminded them that they still needed to behave more modestly in the presence of the girls and guests. Pico asked Raphael why the young master was behaving so strangely, so relaxed and open. The bewildered merchant agreed with his assistant, because the young master was indeed unlike his serious father, and this was precisely what made him all the more interesting. Raphael was very interested to see how Noct, as the new owner of these lands, would decorate and renovate his house. A month had passed since Noct began rebuilding the estate, and thanks to his joint efforts with Mare, he had solved the food problem. Noct used his earth magic abilities and skills to rebuild the walls and protect the estate. Therefore, Raphael promised to continue trading with him. The young master began to think about his next step. During the settlement's development, Noct's objective was to supplement the severely understaffed workforce in the area. Mar reported that the merchant Raphael was approaching, his face beaming with joy, and with him were new people who would be coming to settle. Noct asked Raphael for help with this matter. To do so, Noct used his gem enhancement skill, and half of the profits from the transaction would be given to Raphael as compensation. Raphael was delighted with the agreement, though the young master decided not to abuse the power of his skill. Noct was overjoyed by the situation and declared that the revival of the estate could now be considered complete. Noct hoped that when things got better, he would finally be able to rest comfortably and sleep as much as he wished. Noct met Raphael without greeting him, then inquired about his well-being. The merchant Raphael said he had brought 4 migrants and, as usual, asked his assistant Pico to perform a drum display to announce it. Noct was surprised and wondered if the merchant intended to pull the migrants out of his suitcase. However, Raphael took out a special gift from the capital and gave it to the young master. At that moment, more migrants stepped out of the vehicle, and Noct was utterly surprised to see that they were real people. Beastmen. Raphael explained that there was no need to worry, as these beastmen were not former slaves. Noct replied that regardless, these beastmen still suffered discrimination and unfair condemnation. Though unspoken, their eyes were filled with sadness. This clearly showed what they had endured in the past. Noct welcomed the new residents and asked their names. The older woman introduced herself as Olivia. The little girl, feeling shy, called herself Cuckoo. Noct explained that he owned the land and was happy to meet them. Another immigrant said that Noct was too small and young to be a lord. There were 2 migrants, and judging from their conversation, Noct guessed they were relatives. Because of their height, Noct thought they were children and suggested they come down immediately, as it was too dangerous up there. The migrants immediately jumped out of the vehicle, and Noct realized they were indeed dwarves, despite their small stature. They were fully grown adults. The dwarves explained that they hadn't been adults for long. They were only 121 years old. This year, the dwarves have named themselves Rog and Giama. Noct was surprised to see the ground beneath their feet collapse as they jumped out of the car. Olivia became angry and said that their weight was perfectly normal for their age. Joseph immediately reminded the young man that he shouldn't use such impolite language when speaking about girls and shouldn't forget proper etiquette. Noct immediately apologized for his oversight and promised not to do it again. Olivia explained that their weapons were actually too heavy, which caused the impact on the ground. The merchant Raphael said that, in fact, there were quite a few such people in the capital. The dwarves wanted to migrate to this land, but their families were involved in the construction of the capital tower, and they were first-class carpenters who would help in the construction of the land. Noct greatly admired the dwarves' abilities, as the light tower was truly impressive. The young lord wondered why such top-tier craftsmen would come to live on his land. Olivia calmed down her noisy older brother. Olivia explained that they simply wanted to see the world around them, so they decided to leave the capital. Noct still didn't understand the true reason for the dwarf family's arrival, but one thing was clear. They truly had their own motives, and thanks to their abilities, the dwarf family would be able to restore the houses on the estate and improve the settlement. The young man admitted that he had seen the capital tower before, and indeed it was very tall and beautiful. The dwarves said they could also build small structures, and all their work was a sacred act that they gladly performed. The young master was surprised to see these small people carrying such enormous weapons, and realized that they truly loved big things. Rog said that the design of the capital tower was developed by his sister, and then he asked everyone to see the model that was used to build the tower. Noct was surprised by the quality of the model's design because it looked so perfect. Noct noticed that Olivia was very happy, and he decided that this was a great sign for future cooperation. The young master admitted that he was truly impressed seeing the capital tower in person, as he had never seen such a huge and impressive structure before. Then, Noct noticed Olivia's expression change slightly, but he didn't know what had caused her to react that way. The young master said he truly admired how it was possible to create such a massive tower using such an accurate model. Olivia irritably demanded that they stop talking about it. Noct realized how easily she got angry and promised not to bring up the topic again. The young master then thanked all the new residents once again for choosing to continue their lives with him. Noct said he wanted to begin by explaining the situation and the guarantees he offered. The young master promised to provide each resident with enough food for 3 months, housing and land to work on, and 5 tickets for outdoor bathing. Olivia asked for clarification on what the food supply meant. Noct replied that this wasn't a problem for him and immediately demonstrated his enhanced abilities. The young master explained that this was how his skill worked. However, he had to apologize for only being able to provide vegetables from the food source. At this point, Noct noticed the doll's fangs and wondered why they could suddenly move. The little cuckoo girl lunged forward while Noct tried to figure out what she was doing. Then Noct was surprised to see Cuckoo's strength, because she can easily pull vegetables from the ground. Cuckoo asked the young master if he could increase the quantity of these vegetables. Olivia asked Cuckoo to behave more modestly and not do that again, as asking for something from a young master was impolite. Noct said there was no need to worry and that it was no problem for him at all, then easily increased the amount of vegetables as requested. Cuckoo was delighted, and Noct felt happy that he could please her so much. The cuckoo happily began eating the fruit and enjoying its wonderful taste. Then she called Noct Dad. Olivia quickly apologized for her daughter's behavior and explained that the little girl loved vegetables. Noct secretly thought that she looked very much like a little fox. Olivia admitted that they were truly happy that the landowner was such a kind person. Olivia asked what they could do to repay this favor. The young master explained that the most important thing on his land was that only those who genuinely wanted to work were allowed to work. And there's no point in doing things you don't want to do. And if they like vegetables so much, they could try growing them to satisfy their hobby. Cuckoo exclaimed that she would definitely grow vegetables. Noct thanked the girl for her kind intentions and said he would rely on her in this matter. Dwarfhorn asked his sister what they would have to do. Olivia immediately replied that she would take care of her daily tasks herself. Noct was surprised by this enthusiasm, as he hadn't expected such a reaction. The young master admitted that he genuinely hoped the dwarves would help him rebuild his land. Olivia asked if there was a problem, and she immediately pointed out that Noct himself had said that only those who truly wanted to work would be allowed to work. Noct thought that if the dwarves didn't work for him, it would be detrimental to him, and he couldn't let them be lazy. So he decided he had to act more wisely. He couldn't understand why they would belittle his extraordinary talent, and he couldn't believe they didn't want to work. After all, they needed to create and innovate something, and they shouldn't give up. Olivia told Noct he should stop just talking and trying to convince them. She also reminded him that as the owner of the land, he was fully responsible for his words. Noct was annoyed by this attitude, and Cuckoo told the dwarves that they shouldn't mock their young master. Olivia also reminded her that children shouldn't interrupt adult conversations. Cuckoo refused to back down, saying that if they considered themselves adults, then in this case they should work for the common good. Olivia replied that it wasn't a bad way to persuade. For a beastman, Cuckoo immediately called the beastman lazy, useless, and a worthless creature. The little girl explained that those who do nothing but receive gifts without contributing anything are merely walking corpses, useless creatures. Olivia quickly intervened and explained to the little girl that it was an extremely rude remark. However, Cuckoo responded that she couldn't tolerate such treatment of her young owner. She felt too tired of just hearing dissenting opinions. Cuckoo constantly talked about the excuses others made every day, because ultimately nothing happens without a reason, and you have to achieve things for yourself. Olivia began to soothe her daughter and asked her to stop saying such things. Eventually, her words had an effect, and Cuckoo said she would work like everyone else. Noct admired the girl's eloquence and praised her success. Nost thanked the dwarves for agreeing to help, and explained that there was something he wanted to ask them immediately. Cuckoo replied that the young master didn't want them building a house for him. Noct said that wasn't what he wanted, and asked them to come to his father's office. He explained further. Noct notices a crack in the wall and thinks it would be a good idea to repair it, preventing further damage. Cuckoo asks if they're really going to start working even without breakfast. Cuckoo promises to look into it and tells his younger brother he can sleep in for a while. Meanwhile, Beastman asks the young master to leave the office as his presence only complicates her work. Noct realized that these cracks were truly disturbing him. He was immediately overwhelmed by memories, recalling loved ones who were no longer with him. Noct was delighted to learn that the craftsman who had built the Capitol Tower would be the one to renovate his father's study, as it was the only place that held family memories. After walking around for a bit, he returned to the office and heard a loud noise. He wondered if it was too much noise just to fix a crack. But what he saw in the office surprised him greatly. Noct couldn't understand what was happening. Cuckoo was leaning against the wall, muttering about how things hadn't gone as she'd hoped. Noct couldn't bear the sight of the destruction before his eyes, and he asked what was going on. Cuckoo calmly replied that she hadn't done anything. The wall had collapsed on its own. Father Noct's study has always been a special place for him. It wasn't just his workplace. He'd loved visiting it since he was a child. His father was always delighted when Noct came to visit his study. His father would often suggest Noct sit in his chair for a while, as if he were its owner. Noct would happily reply that the chair was always the softest and most comfortable in the house. His older brother Vissart was always annoyed and reminded him that when he grew up, he would be the one sitting in that chair. His father told his sons that as adults they should help each other in everything, and that Vissart should treat his younger brother with respect. Father Noct's study became a place where all three brothers often spent time. The memories of it always warmed Noct's heart. However, at the moment, Noct couldn't believe what had happened to his father's office. Cuckoo tried to explain that it was all an accident, and her hands were shaking, causing her to miscalculate the force of the impact. Raphael, a merchant, rushed to the scene upon hearing the commotion and was horrified by what he saw. Raphael said that some hunters had agreed to join the young master's settlement on the condition that they be provided with accommodation, and if they could convince these hunters, they wouldn't have to worry about meat anymore. Noct wondered what it really was like to be a lord, and whatever kind of person he was in this position, Noct realized that, as a lord, he couldn't turn his back on his people. He had to understand their strengths and weaknesses and do his best to keep them happy. Noct wondered where Cuckoo had gone in such a hurry, and he was also curious about the actual average weight of dwarves. After searching for a while, Noct found Cuckoo. Noct asked if he could sit next to her. The girl asked if he had come here just to scold her. Noct explained that everyone was actually wrong, including himself, the landowner, who was also prone to making mistakes. Noct asked if Cuckoo's hand was really just trembling, and Cuckoo replied that Noct wasn't stupid enough to believe such a ridiculous excuse. Then the girl admitted that, in truth, she didn't know what to do. Cuckoo felt utterly disheartened. She couldn't do what she needed to with the hammer, and the problem was she had absolutely no control over her power. The greatest divine achievement for her was building something truly great. And for every dwarf, the ultimate goal in life is to create something outstanding. That's why she left home. Cuckoo explained that she could only create aesthetically pleasing models, and that was the limit of all her abilities and achievements. Noct found this information surprising, and he hadn't even known about it before. However, the owner was genuinely impressed by the model she had built. He then asked if it was possible to make the bridge in the model vibrate a little, as it looked truly stunning. Cuckoo explained that the model is made from sand, but it simulates everything very accurately, just like in reality. Noct realized that Cuckoo liked large-scale projects, as this was a value that dwarves generally held. However, Cuckoo was different from her kind. She preferred creating small models, and simply understanding this was enough. Cuckoo looked at the beautiful sandcastle and agreed that it was indeed strange. The dwarves were different, but this difference wasn't a bad thing. Noct explained that he really wanted to create a place where people could just do what they liked. The owner said that he himself, for example, always wanted to sleep for days on end, although not everyone would enjoy that. Cuckoo was surprised by his confession, and Noct boasted that he could fall asleep in just 3 seconds and that this was his talent. Cuckoo replied that it was a very questionable talent, and that, as a lord, her talent, on the contrary, was far more useful. Cuckoo displayed a model of the house she made, down to the smallest detail. The young owner was amazed by the model's beauty, as it could even open windows and doors. Cuckoo boasted that she always pays attention to the smallest details. Noct pondered the possibilities of using his skills. Then he decided to surprise the girl and use his item enhancement skill. Cuckoo was extremely surprised when her miniature model transformed into a giant house. Noct congratulated himself for using his object enhancement skill so brilliantly. The young owner explained to Cuckoo that her model could now become a real house. The girl was delighted that someone finally appreciated her abilities. After all, Cuckoo's family had always scolded her for her boring little models. The young master explained to Cuckoo that she could now build a real house, and that she was largely responsible for the work. Cuckoo was delighted and said she would live in the house. Olivia also confirmed that she really liked the house. The interior and decor are amazing. Cuckoo is so happy that this is truly a place where they can do the things they love. As usual, Noct began searching for a bed in his new home. Cuckoo told his brother that it was truly the right decision to come to this land. A few days later, Master Noct decided to enrich his work and began hunting. And so he began hunting, and as Noct chased a rabbit, he thought he had caught it. But at the last minute, he failed. Luce and Greg asked what their master was doing. Noct realized that hunting wasn't his forte and said he would leave it to them. Luce immediately used her enhanced splitting skill, then combined it with her accurate shooting skill. Greg's goal was achieved, and they were able to solve the problem effectively. Luce replied that things hadn't gone exactly as she expected, but the result mattered. Greg reassured his colleague, saying that everything was going according to plan. Noct added that this wasn't something a true hunter would do, and praised them for their excellent work. Greg then discovered a beehive, and he used a fireball to kill the aggressive bees. Luce gazed intently at the deer, which happened to be right next to her. Noct admired their skills and said that in this case he had complete faith in them. Thanks to Julna, Noct's territory became much more beautiful and comfortable in an instant, as they acquired many wonderful new buildings. There were also 2 new residents, both experts in the art of hunting. Luce was a skilled elf, and Greg was a seasoned adventurer. When the hunt was over, they both boasted about a fantastic catch. Thanks to that, everyone could enjoy fresh meat. Noct was overjoyed that he could finally eat meat, something he had been dreaming of for a month and a half. The sight of only vegetables made him feel nauseous. Luce and Greg said they would go home to prepare a delicious meal with fresh meat. This left Noct slightly disappointed, as he had gone hunting with them, hoping they would grill the meat and eat it right away. The young master suggested eating outdoors as the surrounding scenery was beautiful. Luce agreed and also took in the scenery. Greg said he would call the other residents for lunch, while Noct suggested Greg stay behind to tend the fire, and he would go down to call the others. Once everyone had gathered, Noct was delighted that everyone was busy with interesting and important work, and together they formed a friendly team. The smell of grilled meat was amazing, and Noct wondered if this was the pinnacle of happiness, finding joy in simple things. Mare was starting to get tired of waiting and said that the meat was cooked through and ready to eat. Young Master requested a little more time and used his enhancement ability on the piece of meat. The grilled meat transformed into a very large piece. This moved Joseph so much that he admitted he was willing to follow Noct anywhere. Everyone was delighted with the enormous amount of meat they could enjoy. Joseph said that he had specially cut the largest piece of meat for his beloved master, Noct, and gave him a gift to thank him for his help. Noct called Joseph the best butler in the world. Noct stared at the piece of meat with a hungry gaze, thinking that he had finally waited for this moment. But suddenly a hot piece of meat slipped from Noct's hand, and he had no choice but to chase after it. Mare only had time to yell that he didn't need to do that, but Noct was so focused on grabbing the fried meat that he didn't realize he was falling off the cliff. Noct thought that even if he died right then, he wouldn't regret anything. Then, upon landing, the young master realized how unbelievable it was that he felt no pain at all. When Noct hit the ground, the first thing that came to his mind was that he might have fallen into another ravine. But then, he realized that reality was quite different, and this place was like some kind of paradise. A giant girl complained that she felt a little itchy. Noct was so surprised he couldn't identify who this giant girl was. All his thoughts revolved around the hot grilled meat, and that's why he fell off the cliff. But thanks to the collision with the giant girl, he was able to lessen the impact of the fall. Noct didn't understand why this girl was so huge or how she got there. Mary shouted from above, trying to find out if the young master was all right. Then they all saw and shouted that there was a real giant down there. The giant girl saw the grilled meat and exclaimed that it was exactly what she needed. Noct watched with regret as she ate the meat, realizing it would soon be gone. The giant girl said the meat was delicious and she wanted more. The young owner decided he couldn't let her continue like that, otherwise they would have nothing to eat. Noct uses his abilities and grows to the size of the giant girl. The giant girl was surprised and said that Noct was like a bear. Noct asked her not to eat any more of their meat. He explained that everyone should get to enjoy this meat. Not just her, but every resident deserved a proper portion. The giant girl apologized and said she didn't know it was their meat. She admitted that she just really wanted to eat it and that the meat was delicious. The giant girl immediately felt anxious, and Noct decided to rectify the situation. He applied his magnification ability and once again made the piece of meat appear enormous. Everyone was delighted with his actions and praised the young owner for his brilliant creativity. Afterward, everyone continued the meal together and everyone was full. The giant girl asked about an incredibly sweet and delicious liquid. Mare explained that it was a special sauce made from fruit, used to eat with meat. The giant girl knew this was the first time she had ever eaten such a delicious dish and asked for more sauce. Noct asked her if this was her first time eating meat. What had she eaten before meeting them? The giant girl said she had to eat all sorts of things, sometimes fruit, sometimes animals, and sometimes even monsters. Nock was surprised that she would eat monsters. The merchant Raphael said that the girl came from a family of giants. Raphael explained to the young master that their name spoke for itself, and that giants, according to eyewitness accounts, were very large and brave creatures. Young Master Noct realized that because this girl was a giant, she was absorbed by the local monsters, which means she is unconscious but still protects his territory. The giant girl continued to enjoy her meal and kept asking Noct for more food. The young master didn't refuse and was happy to see the giant girl satisfied. Finally, lunch ended with everyone happy because of the food. Everyone was full and satisfied, but only the young master felt extremely tired. Mare remarked that Noct looked very weary and exhausted. The young master admitted that he really did feel sluggish and had probably overused his abilities. Then, Noct announced that it was time to go home and said goodbye to the giant girl. The giant girl looked sad as she watched the noisy group leave. She didn't want to be alone again because she was tired of loneliness. She told the young master that she wanted to go with them. Noct was surprised by the giant girl's wish and asked if she really wanted to live in his territory. The young master decided that he couldn't take care of this giant girl, and he told her she shouldn't because her family would surely worry about her if she left. She became angry and started shouting that she wanted to go with everyone. Noct was frightened by the giant girl's anger and asked her to calm down. He explained that he had no objection to her living with them, but her size will cause a lot of problems, and he could try to reduce her size a little. Noct asked her to relax and not resist, and eventually everything went smoothly. The giant girl was back to her normal size. Upon arriving at the settlement, she was surprised by the quality of life of the residents. Noct explained that everything was owned by large and small families. She was delighted with the new feeling and acknowledged that being small was wonderful because she could enter any house. Noct pondered after bringing the giant girl home following the barbecue. He couldn't be sure if he'd done the right thing and what would happen to her family. Noct also noticed that when he used his ability on the girl, there was no resistance like with the slime. Perhaps because the girl didn't object to the change. He decided that if he wanted to, he could restore her to her original size without any problem. Then, the young owner admitted he was very tired and would go to sleep. She immediately shouted that she wanted to visit the settlement right away, but Noct said she'd do it tomorrow. Meanwhile, Mare suggested taking a bath to get clean, and agreed. Feeling confused and not understanding what they were talking about, she asked, "What is a bath?" Noct woke up unexpectedly in the middle of the night and felt a soft, pleasant sensation in his hand. He thought it was a beautiful pillow and wondered why he had never noticed it before. But when he opened his eyes, Noct realized he was lying next to him. She greeted him naturally as if nothing had happened. Noct was surprised and tried to remember when this girl had gotten into his bed without his knowledge. However, she was completely relaxed and seemed very happy. Mare greeted young master and said that she had brought him some fresh fruit she had just picked. Noct's guardian was at a loss for words regarding this bizarre situation. Mare was angry and asked if young master would give an explanation for what she had just seen. She was delighted to see the fresh plums. And before Noct could react, the girl dragged him out of the room. Mare's furious shouts rang out from behind as she tried to remind him about his clothes. Noct asked where she was taking him in such a hurry, reminding him of his promise to show her around his estate. When they went outside, they met Olivia and Cuckoo, who happily greeted young master. Noct led Cuckoo on a tour of the vegetable garden. There, the little doll grew many kinds of vegetables, and Cuckoo immediately praised the giant root vegetable that had grown thanks to her efforts. When I first saw this vegetable, I asked what kind of root it was and why it was so white. Noct explained that it wasn't a root at all. The young man was surprised that the giants knew nothing about vegetables. Noct explained that if eaten in moderation, vegetables are delicious and good for health. Cuckoo agreed with Noct and suggested trying the vegetables. She agreed and said she really liked its sweetness. She asked what kind of fruit it was. Cuckoo replied that it wasn't a fruit, but a type of vegetable called dakin. She said that Cuckoo's vegetables were delicious and she was happy to have tried them. The young man praised the little girl, saying it was a well-deserved reward for her efforts. Cuckoo replied that it was exactly what she wanted, as she wanted to grow vegetables with love. Noct asked if she really liked dakin that much, since she had eaten it in just a few minutes. The giant girl confessed that she didn't like vegetables, but actually enjoyed eating with others. Cuckoo was no less enthusiastic, and when eating dakin, she said she was pleased with its taste. It explains that the true joy of eating is not about eating alone. The young man recalled how hungry the girl must have been. When they first met and he saw her disheveled appearance, Noct also realized that she knew nothing about cooking. The young man wondered if she had been living alone all this time, and he reminded her that her family would be worried. Therefore, it's best not to mention it, as it might upset her. Cuckoo said that in life, anything can happen, and there's nothing you can do about it. Then the young gardener offered her pumpkin to try. But a strange sound interrupted their sweet conversation, instantly putting everyone on alert. The young man asked what that eerie sound was, and if it was Silvermoon's howl. Silvermoon was a wolf. With blood-red eyes and a brilliant silver coat, this wolf was an extremely dangerous inhabitant of the Great Forest. Even so, it shouldn't approach Nokt's area under any circumstances. The young man recalled that at this time, the two hunters, Luce and Greg, were outside the settlement. Cuckoo was very frightened and started crying and hurriedly tried to comfort her, saying that everything would be all right. Then, tell the young man that they need to leave immediately. The young man asked where they were going in such a hurry. She explained that she could smell Greg and Luce and that they were somewhere nearby. She also said that she was absolutely certain someone had attacked them. Indeed, not far from here, Greg and Luce are trying to find a way out of a difficult situation, which they are facing. Greg angrily stated that no one had expected a Silvermoon here, and that they had been incredibly careless. Greg said they needed to find a way to distract the wolf pack and try to retreat to young Master Nokt's territory. They shouted that they had finally found them, and indeed they were being attacked by wolves. Nokt sees the pack of wolves attacking and tries to help by using his shrinking ability on the wolves. But surprisingly, this yielded no result, and the wolf fought back as if by magic. Luz and Greg launched a fierce counterattack despite being outnumbered. She shouted that she would come to help immediately. After a while, the young man was surprised by the power of... Luce and Greg anxiously asked the boy if he was all right, and he replied that he was fine and they would hurry to help him. She happily said that she could now move around much more easily than when she was giant. Nokt replied that it was great news and he was very happy for her. The young man demanded that the vicious wolves be dealt with so they would no longer disturb his territory, and enthusiastically declared that she would not let a single wolf escape. You can trust her, and she will not let a single wolf get away. Nokt yelled that it was time to put an end to this. The giant girl said that these hateful wolves were always watching her, and now it's time to put an end to it all. Suddenly, a pack of wolves shrieked in fear, and they started running away. Young Master said it was unbelievable that the wolves would run away out of fear. She shouted that she had completed Young Master's task and everything was now fine. Nokt praised her and said that this was exactly what he expected from his student. She was extremely happy and proud of herself. Luce wondered where Silvermoon might have come from. Greg guessed it might have been driven away by the orcs. Nokt suspected something might have happened in the forest, and until they found out why, they wouldn't be able to sleep soundly. He pondered the young master's words and began to look for a way to solve the problem. Nokt then said that thanks to his abilities, everything went smoothly this time, so he didn't mind getting some sleep. However, urging the young master not to fall asleep yet, the girl said she knew a place that sold a very delicious fruit. She explained that she had frightened Cuckoo and the others. She wanted to treat everyone to this wonderful fruit. Nokt asked her why she suddenly thought of fruit. Back when he was in the forest, Nokt said there was a house that looked wild. The giant girl explained that these fruits grew in the garden, and now she was going to bring them over. Nokt and the others were surprised by the size of the furniture in the house, and realized that settling in here wouldn't be easy. Of course there are chairs, even 3. Nokt is referring to the elf girl. The 3 chairs have their own reason. She apologized for keeping everyone waiting and said she had brought the fruit. Nokt noticed they looked very much like grapes and asked what they were called. Luce replied that she didn't know the name, only that they were fruit or delicious fruit. Luce admitted that this was the first time she had seen this type of fruit. Nokt tasted it and said it was a little too sweet. He replied that it was actually much tastier. Before Nokt decided to try something new and apply a flavor-reducing method to these fruits, he exclaimed that they still tasted the same as before. The young master explained that a larger fruit would have less sweetness, and if the flavor were reduced, they would taste different. Nokt admitted that he had never eaten anything like it before, and according to him, it could be used to make excellent wine, as the villa had the right equipment. Nokt asked if she would mind experimenting with these fruits, and Cuckoo would be happy to try something new. Thank you, young master, for being here. They didn't have much time together, but she was very happy. She explained that the wolves had always been watching her, but they had never come this close before. And even this time, when she went out to meet them alone, they just ran away. They said something had happened in the forest because she had shrunk, and maybe someone was no longer afraid to enter these lands. Therefore, she decided to stay here to protect the territory. Nokt used his magnification ability and returned to his original form. She laughed at how small Nokt looked now, but he said it was too big. To be forgiven, I require that I take care of all the inhabitants of the estate. Nokt thought that since she had made that decision, it must be for the best. He realized that it was really too sad. And he said that shouldn't be the case. Ask what's going on and why they aren't leaving. Noct explained that if she didn't come back to everyone, Mare would be very angry. Remind them that if she stays with them, it will be dangerous and she might not be able to protect them next time. Noct promised that if danger arose, he would personally protect all the settlers. Ultimately, it was his responsibility as the ruler of the land. Noct told the giant girl not to worry and invited her home with everyone. Burst into tears of happiness, and she thanked Noct for his trust. They shouted that they had forgotten to bring souvenirs and had brought along a bunch of strange berries. Noct immediately reduced their size to make them easier to carry, and everyone was ready to set off. Noct suggested giving the fruit a name since it didn't have one, and ultimately, not having a name was really inconvenient. Since she's the one who found them, she should come up with a name for the fruit. The girl thought for a moment and then exclaimed that she would call it ear. Noct praised the idea of using the syllables from his name, saying it was really convenient. She admitted that she was happy with the name and glad to be around everyone. Mare and Noct quickly decided to plant a real tree. They combined two abilities, activate the cells and enhance the items. Mare was pleased with the results and said that with Noct's skills, he could do anything he wanted. The tired guy said that he didn't want to work anymore and needed to rest. Mare admitted that she truly believed they were a perfect match for each other. Noct felt embarrassed by this admission and joked that he needed to check compatibility with other people as well. Meanwhile, Joseph called his master and said he had important news. The loyal housekeeper explained that a tax inspector had visited the estate. Noct wasn't surprised by the visit because he didn't understand the reason. How should we treat the tax inspectors? Mare asked. She assumed they were there to collect taxes. Noct replied that this was likely the case and that even his father was always unhappy when tax inspectors visited. Joseph explained that landowners had to pay a portion of their profits to the kingdom. Despite knowing about the devastating ORC attack on their estates, they still sent tax inspectors. Joseph stated that the tax inspector's job is to determine the annual tax amount and that they have no right to refuse payment of taxes stipulated by the state. Noct asked Joseph and Mare not to worry. Then the young owner explained. He said he wouldn't pay a single cent for his legally owned land and would try to resolve the issue immediately. Noct greeted the tax inspector with solemnity and asked if the inspector was very tired after his long journey. The young owner then introduced himself formally and explained that he was currently managing the estate. Therefore, he wants to request a tax exemption from the tax authorities for this year because they are focusing on rebuilding after the ORC attack. The tax inspector asked why the lord of the land was bowing his head in shame to the floor, and whether he had absolutely no self-respect whatsoever. Noct explained that if it helped protect the peaceful lives of his people, he was willing to make such a sacrifice. Despite his pride, Noct noticed the tax inspector's dirty shoes and offered to have them repaired immediately. The tax inspector admitted that she had heard about the attack on the land and wanted more details about the incident. Noct briefly explained the entire situation as well as the difficulties they were facing in reclaiming the land. The tax inspector knew that the residents had done a very good job, but she didn't understand some things and wanted clarification on a few points. She asked where the massive walls surrounding the estate came from. Noct explained that those walls were built by all the residents. The inspector asked if this meant the restoration had been successful. Noct agreed with that assessment and added that they weren't ready to export yet. They were currently only meeting their own needs. Nevertheless, in the future, he will certainly consider the possibility of offering unique products from his land. Noct suggested that the tax inspector sample this amazing fruit. The stern girl admitted that it was the first time she had seen anything like it, but at the same time she was very interested in its strange appearance. The tax inspector agreed to try the product and carefully took a bite of the fruit. She commented that the fruit was very sweet and juicy with a wonderful aftertaste. She felt it helped relieve fatigue and headaches. The girl once again pretended to be a strict tax inspector and continued to listen to the young owner. Noct explained that they were considering growing such fruits and making candy, as well as producing homemade liquor. Tax inspectors were surprised by the prospects of this type of production. After a moment of thought, she said that she was willing to consider the current situation and, for this reason, agreed to exempt the land from taxes this year. Upon parting ways, the tax inspector said she wanted to warn the young employer. The stern girl explained that Noct should be careful, as it's very dangerous when all important matters depend on just one person. Noct thought the girl was right and truly had good judgment. The tax inspector said that a nation that relies solely on the strength of one person will sooner or later be destroyed. Mare said the girl gave the impression of being a scary person, while the young owner disagreed and called the tax inspector a kind person. Nock said it was wrong to rely solely on his skills for everything, because if something happened to him, it would ruin everyone. Although there are now more residents on the estate, if he were to suddenly disappear, the people here would have to fend for themselves without his skills. Joseph replied that Noct had matured too quickly and become a wise man. Now, the young master looked very much like his father. Noct replied that in this way he could continue to live a peaceful life and sleep for days on end, if he was sure that everyone could do their job well. Noct asked Joseph what he meant by comparing him to his father, but the old butler replied that there was nothing to worry about. After the hunting ban was lifted, and they began producing their own products, we established a stable supply of food, clothing, and housing within the settlement. As a result, the number of inhabitants of the land belonging to the young master Noct also increased. Noct was very pleased with the outcome and happily watched Mare's efforts. Everything went on as usual, and the young owner found an opportunity to do nothing but sleep to satisfy his personal preference. The only one who felt indignant, of course, was the old steward Joseph. Joseph rebuked the young master for always lying on his side in bed after meals, while the number of new residents had increased considerably. As the owner of the estate, he was not setting a good example for his people. Joseph asked what the young master's father would think when he returned home. Noct explained that he had worked hard until lunchtime, so he wasn't exactly lazy. Noct said that he and Mare had worked diligently, and thanks to their combined efforts and abilities, they had developed a new sweet seed. Their mission was to produce the sweetest onions and tomatoes, even without his skills. Currently, the process was in the pollination stage. Joseph listened to the young master's justification and asked him not to lie. Noct confided in Olivia that Joseph didn't trust him at all, and that it was all so cruel to him. Olivia admitted that she felt heartbroken hearing this, and she disagreed with Joseph's point of view. The little cuckoo quickly comforted its owner and called him a good person. Olivia tried a new variety of onions being grown and confirmed that they were indeed very sweet and delicious. Noct was very pleased with this assessment, and once again he lamented that Joseph couldn't see the results. Olivia comforted her young master for his extraordinary efforts and reassured Noct that everything would be all right. In the next moment, Olivia apologized for acting like a doll in front of her owner and allowed herself to pat Noct on the head. Noct didn't dwell on his feelings and regained his composure. The young owner received a new type of tomato. Olivia and Cuckoo were surprised by the strange appearance of a very familiar vegetable. Noct said that if they felt hungry, he had plenty of other vegetables. Olivia smiled and said that if the young master wanted lunch, she was happy to take care of it. Noct happily looked at the beautiful girl and replied that he was very happy to have lunch with everyone. Noct asked why they were cooking outdoors. Olivia explained that cooking in the sunshine was more pleasant and convenient. Thanks to the fireball, igniting the furnace was done quickly, and the cooking process is significantly shortened. The young owner is looking forward to eating home-cooked meals. Because he was really hungry, Noct decided to lie down so as not to disturb the skilled cooks. A nap accompanied by the sounds of food being prepared seemed like a great idea to Noct. Moreover, he could eat right after waking up. While enjoying the comfort of his lying position, he suddenly heard someone running towards him very quickly. She appeared immediately and confessed that she had smelled Noct. Behind them were the merchant Raphael and his assistant. Raphael suggested that Noct should not repeat this incident, but the young master reminded him that this had to be their secret. Soon the dwarves appeared, shouting that they were very hungry. Olivia was delighted by the lively crowd and made a Napoleon pie from sweet onions and tomatoes. Everyone was delighted with the home-cooked food, and a real food festival began. Noct thoroughly enjoyed the new dish and praised Olivia for her talent and creativity in cooking. Even Joseph admitted that achieving this flavor with only onions and tomatoes was an incredibly impressive feat. Olivia told the grumpy butler that she was delighted he liked her cooking. Olivia explained that the vegetables were invented by the young master and that she only used them in the kitchen. She also explained that these vegetables were grown without using Noct's skills, and now everyone could safely grow these unique vegetables in their gardens. Joseph only then realized that the young master wasn't deceiving him, but was genuinely trying to do something useful. Joseph said that the new variety of tomatoes and onions was very delicious and unusual. The old butler apologized to his young master for the words he had spoken that morning. Noct looked surprised and said he didn't remember anything happening this morning. Olivia said she really enjoyed the lively and cheerful atmosphere because everyone was together and enjoying the simple things. Noct noticed with a touch of regret that there used to be so many more people under his father's rule. Olivia told him not to be sad and said that she had traveled to many different places and could compare. Because of frequent travel, Cuckoo had become very shy. But when they arrived at this place, everything had changed. Finally, they found a place where they could breathe deeply and feel free. Olivia admitted that she was extremely happy to be here, and all the residents of the settlement were incredibly grateful to the young owner for his efforts and care. The young owner, on the other hand, thought that he was actually the one who needed to thank everyone around him. Nock decided that he would pray for the happiness of his people. He would also do everything in his power to ensure that the horrific story of the destruction of his land would never be repeated. Suddenly, the hunters appeared and reported some disturbing news. After examining the traces of the orcs, the young master said it must have been a reconnaissance mission. Based on the tracks, the orc vanguard stopped here and turned back. The young owner realized that this might indicate his brother and father could not have survived. He immediately recalled his conversation with Joseph, when he was convinced that his father and brother were still alive, and Joseph hadn't insisted on convincing him otherwise. Noct realized that history was repeating itself, and the orcs were once again closing in on his land. The young owner thought he couldn't avoid the orc attack on his land. And now he has to decide what to do, because this is the first time he's faced this problem alone. Noct wondered what his father and older brother would do in this situation. Joseph said that if the orcs were there to scout, it was a sure sign that an attack was imminent. Mare asked if the orcs could think and plan like that. The hunter Luce replied that she had discovered very strange small footprints of the orc scouts. She explained that orcs are divided into many types and have a leader, who possesses exceptional intelligence. The strangest type of orc is usually a general, but above the general is the king, and it's highly likely they are facing a general who can orchestrate a perfect attack. She said that orcs are truly terrifying creatures, and that she had witnessed orcs eating animals at the same time, even carrying children and biting into raw meat. She couldn't believe that orcs were truly barbaric creatures who wouldn't spare anyone. He asked if the orcs had attacked the young master before, and the butler answered his question, saying that the last attack was terrible. She cried out that she was furious and vowed to destroy any orcs that dared approach her young mistress. Noct hurried to calm the angry giant and asked her what she would do. She replied that she would use her powers and show her master how. Greg, worried about Noct, urged her to calm down immediately and not do that. The hunter. Greg explained that all decisions had to be made by the young master Noct. Mare feared for Noct and hastily activated the cells to heal him. The young owner said that people should decide for themselves whether they would stay in the city or leave the settlement to seek salvation. Noct realized that he couldn't give orders like his brother or father, but the soldiers still supported him and asked about the defense plan. Mare said that everyone is waiting for the owner's decision and is ready to support him in any situation. Noct remembered his father's admonition to protect his people. The young master decided that he had to defend his land. Noct says he can't do anything alone and asks for help to protect their shared home. Together, we must protect our families, Noct said. All the residents listened to the owner's plea and decided to join forces for a common goal. Go meet Noct. The young owner asked her if she really wanted more meat, since she had just finished eating. The girl replied that it wasn't the reason she had come. She asked Noct to make her grow up again. She explained that in this situation, she would be much stronger and able to defend the settlement more effectively. Noct said that was wonderful, then asked if she was sure of her decision and if she was willing to defend his estate along with the others. He said that this was a very important mission, and the most important thing was that everyone survived and stayed healthy, and she wanted to be a part of it, so she requested that it be rebuilt on a larger scale for the benefit of the remaining residents. Young Master admired the girl's aspirations and praised her highly. Noct then used his ability to magnify objects and transformed back into his giant form. Noct requires taking care of the walls, defending, and being cautious. Mare requested that she grow larger so she could fight like the young master, but the young master replied that this wasn't the best idea. After all, Mare wouldn't be able to properly control her body once she became large, and this wasn't her natural state. Meanwhile, the giant girl had completed all her defensive preparations and wondered if she could protect young master. Soon after, a loud noise was heard nearby, and young master said that the orcs were close to arriving. Indeed, just a few minutes later, the first brutal orc armies emerged from the forest. The most worrying thing was that there was a giant monster leading the orcs. The merchant Raphael was startled and asked what it could be. The inhabitants of the settlement began to panic upon seeing the strange monster. Shouts were heard claiming that the orc general had personally led the attack. At that moment, young master remembered his father and older brother. This filled him with rage and a burning desire for revenge. Because the orc's massive body was draped with his missing brother's sword and his father's cloak, Noct realized that the Orc King himself was approaching his land. Merchant Raphael confirmed that it was indeed the Orc King, a monster and simultaneously a supreme being with divine intelligence and protection. They realized they had been wrong and underestimated the threat. No one could have imagined such a monster would appear here. Young Master Noct said that he had actually predicted this event. Now everything became clear to him. Why hadn't Noct's brother and father returned? Raphael's young assistant quickly counted the approaching orcs, and very quickly she counted over 500 enemies, while the defenders numbered only 28. Young Master Noct said that there was no need to fight all the orcs. What they needed to do was kill the Orc King. This would demoralize the remaining orcs and prevent them from attacking the city further. Noct exclaimed that this time they would surely win. And he will accomplish that without anyone having to sacrifice their life, because everyone's life is precious to him. Noct said that everything had gone smoothly so far because the Orc King had come near them on his own accord. Young Master Noct warns that things may not go as smoothly as he expects, but they must work together according to plan and delay the Orc King for a while. Next, Noct was surprised and saddened to see the Orc King destroy the defensive fortifications with a single blow. The merchant Raphael exclaimed, "The orcs are preparing to attack through a gap in the defenses." Noct shouted that he now had complete faith in Bertna. The giantess replied that she was ready to do everything in her power. Young Master Noct thought that there were indeed many orcs, and it would be very difficult to withstand such an attack. Noct then exclaimed that everything would be all right and that they had a backup plan. In defense, a sharp trap would make it easier for them to deal with the enemy. However, subsequent events left the young master very disappointed. Under the brilliant command of the Orc King, his army found an effective way to bypass the trap. Noct realized that orcs alone weren't too dangerous, but now there was someone who could effectively command them. At this point, the orcs were like real ants, acting in perfect harmony in every situation. Noct decided that even in this situation he would not leave his home. He would rather die than flee. Greg realized the complexity of the situation. Olivia shouted, asking what they had to do now. Olivia called Noct and threw him a small bag. The young master initially didn't understand Olivia's meaning, but the realization came quickly and he decided to do everything he could. Noct placed the miniature models that Olivia had created outside and prepared to face the orcs. Joseph didn't understand what was happening and exclaimed, "Why is the young master kneeling before the orcs?" But at that moment, Noct used his item enhancement ability. In an instant, the defensive structures became a veritable barrier, halting the orcs' advance. Olivia screamed. Olivia said she could create as many dummy models as she wanted, and Noct ordered Olivia to continue. At this point, Mare called all the victims to her for assistance. She also instructed the young master to retreat and move to a safe location. Mare exclaimed that if anything happened to the young master, even victory would be meaningless. Noct agreed with Mare and decided to follow her advice. But then the young master remembered how he used to avoid difficulties and was protected by Mare. Noct realized that he couldn't do that anymore. And now it's his turn to become the protector of his people. The young master used his magic against the orcs, and he shouted that the villagers should not be considered less valuable than their master. Mare stood frozen in surprise as Noct charged toward the orcs. Noct extends his sword only during the strike, and thanks to this trick he can maintain his balance, but this also gives him an incredible boost to the power of his blow. The merchant Raphael noticed that the young master had expended a great deal of effort applying his skills to complex tasks, yet he could still wield an ordinary sword effectively with minimal effort. He achieved maximum efficiency, and it turned out that Noct had completely mastered his rare skill. Joseph admired the young master's efforts in defending his home, while the small merchant's assistant kept reporting the remaining number of orcs. At this point, she could only count 84 monsters. Young Master Noct was delighted with this result and shouted that they would surely repel the attack. Noct then realized that he also had to defeat the main monster, the Orc King, and this is a much more difficult task than that of the average stupid orc. Mare screamed in panic, trying to warn the young master of the impending danger. But there was no time to react to the Orc King's swift attack, and he missed a heavy blow to the stomach. Seeing this, she shouted that she would definitely help. The giant girl immediately rushed to save her young master, but the troublesome orcs tried to stop her. At that moment, she saw the Orc King himself approaching. In her final moments, the giantess tried to shield herself from the Orc King's attack. Unfortunately, she was powerless against that terrifying force. With his last ounce of strength, the young master used his item enhancement skill to make his sword enormous. In a desperate attempt, he tried to strike down the Orc King with the tip of his sword. The young master thought it must be a joke. The young master thought, how could he possibly break a steel sword with just one forceful thrust? But it happened. The Orc King attacked the young master with a furious roar. The young master felt the monster's hideous claws on his body and screamed in pain. The merchant Raphael shouted that the Orc King was bullying his young master. The young master felt like he was about to lose consciousness from the pain. His body was overwhelmed with unbearable fatigue. He really just wanted to sleep and not think about anything anymore. As his consciousness faded, the young master wanted to believe that he had done everything everyone expected. The only thing the young master regretted was never being able to get his father's cloak back. He recalled sitting beside his father as a child, listening to him tell a bedtime story. This story was about monsters that every man should know about. His father told him about a very rare plant called cassila, whose pollen could cause hallucinations, and that this plant actually ate all living things from humans to animals. However, if you watered the plant, it would become harmless. Then his father asked him what the greatest weakness of ORCs was. The small, obedient boy replied that orcs were extremely afraid of fire. His father praised his excellent memory and knowledge. Then his father's familiar voice rang out, saying it was time to wake up. The young master didn't understand what his father wanted, but an inexplicable force pulled him back to reality. When he opened his eyes, he found himself locked in a fierce battle with the Orc King. An excited mare shouted that she was so happy her master was still alive and trying to help him. The young master wondered what he was doing at that moment, how anyone could sleep in such a terrible place. After regaining his composure and gathering his remaining strength, the young master decided that he could only sleep when all his work was done. Immediately, he created a fireball and prepared to attack. The young master thanked his father and older brother for helping him remember something important, because now he understood who he truly was. He unleashed the fireball and simultaneously applied an item enhancement skill to it. The young master shouted that he was the pet of the fire god and a true fire mage. Everyone watching was extremely surprised. The orcs felt an intense fear before the enormous flames. Meanwhile, the inhabitants of the settlement felt hopeful. Now that they could defeat the orcs, the young master continued to increase the size of the flames. And suddenly the Orc King turned around and began to run away in panic. The merchant Raphael excitedly shouted that the Orc King was about to flee into the forest. But that wouldn't happen. The Orc King felt something sharp pierce his leg and roared in pain. Feeling satisfied with herself, she said she was only returning a favor. The Orc King decided to launch another attack to break the people's resistance. To accomplish this, he decided to gather all remaining forces and, at the same time, use the remaining orcs to defend himself. Joseph said that the Orc King was too clever for a monster. Because he had arranged such a protective shield for himself, Olivia called the monster a scoundrel. The young master continued to enlarge the fireball. The Orc King decided to mock him and began showing off his father's cloak. Noda felt a surge of rage. Nox knew for sure that his father and older brother had probably died at the hands of this giant monster. Then the Orc King decided to attack the young master and threw his brother's sword at him. Mare realized the threat Noct was facing and begged him to lower his hand immediately. But the young master decided that if he gave up now, his entire plan would be ruined. But at the last moment, Noct pulled one hand away from the sharp blade and managed to catch the fireball with his other hand. Noct realized that now was the time to act, and he threw a fireball at the orcs. In the final moments of his life, the Orc King felt the unbearable heat of the raging fire and was unable to utter a sound. The inhabitants of the settlement rejoiced at what they saw, as the Orc King was completely destroyed by the fireball, and the threat was no more. The young master felt completely exhausted and very weak. His legs had no strength left. And the last thing he saw before passing out was someone rushing towards him. As Noct gradually regained consciousness, the young master wondered what had happened and how he had fainted. Noct concentrated his thoughts and realized that the loyal mare was right beside him. The girl had tried her best, applying her cell activation skills. Mare wanted to help restore her master's strength, and had done everything she could. Finally, Mare noticed that Noct had woken up and felt relieved. The young master asked her, "How long have I been asleep?" Immediately, the butler Joseph appeared and asked what was really wrong with Noct. When the young master realized he had slept for 3 days straight, he was surprised because he hadn't noticed it at all. Noct thought he was a true genius in his dreams, having achieved such a record. Joseph explained that while Noct slept, Mare continued to use her cell repair skills. Throughout that time, the loyal maid said that their master needed his hair styled, and Noct advised the girl to rest because she had expended so much energy. But the girl said she was fine, and Noct saw the maid applying her self-healing skills. Mare exclaimed that since she was the master's maid, the job had only just begun. Noct agreed and said that if so, Mare owed him lunch for the 3 days she had missed. First, Mare needed to rest. The maid agreed to rest and said that half an hour would be enough. Noct suggested she lie on his bed to regain her strength. Mare immediately fell asleep under the covers, and the young master thanked his loyal maid for all her efforts. The butler Joseph asked Noct where he was going. The young master explained that he wanted to check on the people in the settlement. He also needed to find out something important. Cuckoo was very happy to see Noct had woken up and said that he was finally awake. The young master replied that he was fine and had fully recovered, all thanks to Dr. Cuckoo. Cuckoo felt embarrassed, her face flushing at her master's words, and responded that she only really wanted Noct to recover quickly. Luce said that since Noct was well, now was a good time to get some good meat and throw a party, but immediately it felt like an earthquake had occurred. But it was actually just a giant girl running towards her master. Noct panicked, and quickly used his shrinking ability to return to his normal size. The young master apologized to the girl for making her wear a uniform that was too big for the past 3 days. But in response, she said she was incredibly hungry the whole time. And dreaming of delicious meat, Noct quickly reassured the girl and added the first few drops of sweet onion to soothe her hunger. The giant girl began greedily devouring vegetables and apologized for being too weak in the battle with the orcs, but Noct replied that she was completely wrong. If she hadn't been there at the time, he would have died at the hands of the Orc King. Noct then asked where she was now. With the help of Name, Noct arranged for the graves of his father and brother to be prepared as a sign of respect. Noct thanks his deceased loved ones for their care and support. Then he carefully and thoughtfully decorated the graves with belongings of his father and older brother. Noct, in his spirit, apologized to his father for what had happened. After all, he had been weak since childhood, unable to help his family sooner and save the settlement from destruction. Noct recalled that he had never seen his father rest since he was a child, and his father always refused to let his older brother sleep with him when he felt lonely. Young Master decided that now he had to do his best for his family and for all the residents of his settlement. That was exactly what his father wanted. Noct realizes that he carries within him the blood of someone whom everyone loves and respects, and he will become such a person, a worthy protector and lord of this land. Afterward, a proper ceremony was held to honor the perfect victory of our beloved Lord Noct and the successful restoration of the settlement. Merchant Raphael said he was delighted that everything had ended well. After all, despite everything, they had defeated the strongest orc, and now there was almost no threat left in the forest. Young Master replied that it was all thanks to his own efforts, including the help of the merchant Raphael. The merchant Raphael said that now that everything was completely safe, they just needed to proceed with their plan. Pico's young assistant raised his glass solemnly, and Raphael suggested opening the shop immediately. Noct was surprised to receive an unexpected offer from the merchant Raphael, and asked why he had decided to open a shop in his settlement. Raphael explained that thanks to Noct's efforts, the land was now full of trading opportunities, and so he was willing to develop an organized commercial system in the city. The young master thought he had done well, but then he realized that it wouldn't be easy to eliminate the new anxieties for his settlement. Therefore, he decided he had to work even harder to make his father and brother proud of him. Eventually, Noct was surrounded by all the inhabitants of the city. He said that now they should record the history of the opening of the first store he owned. Immediately, discussions began about which store location would be most logical. Cuckoo said they urgently needed a pub because alcohol was the cure for all problems. Cuckoo began to offer his opinion, and the young man thought there was some truth in it. Noct recalled the days before he lost his job, when he would often get drunk, collapse onto his bed, exhausted, and quickly fall into a sweet sleep. That feeling of absolute peace was wonderful. Luce disagreed, saying that their settlement needed to build a farm first so they could catch rare and delicious animals and start raising them. Because if there was enough meat, all the residents would be happy. The young man decided that Luce was right because eating delicious food and getting a good night's sleep were both very appealing. Noct wondered which option was actually the best for getting a good night's sleep. He thought he really wanted to wake up and see a beautiful maid. At the same time, he wanted to enjoy a delicious and nutritious breakfast. This idea came to him thanks to his vivid imagination. The young master decided that they would open a luxurious inn in his settlement. Joseph was surprised and asked why Noct had made such a strange decision. Immediately, heated debates erupted, with everyone insisting on defending their own project for a new business venture in the city. The little cuckoo unexpectedly declared that all of humanity's wise desires would be aided by the invisible hand of the gods. Noct pondered the fox girl's words, and another project idea popped into his head. The young man thanked Cuckoo for the great suggestion.